Hello, Hanover. We are the Jocelyn Cummings American Legion Post 149. Today, we'd normally find Americans observing parades, enjoying cookouts in the company of family and friends, and paying tribute to the fallen with our unwavering patriotism and devotion to the men and women of the U.S. military. However, this Memorial Day finds our country and the world fighting a new and different battlefield. The COVID-19 pandemic has tested our resolve. As with our military in past wars, America stands united behind the bravery shown by those that must put themselves in harm's way for our welfare and safety. As we endure these trying times while honoring our first responders and healthcare professionals, it is still imperative that we remember the service members that laid down their lives in defense of our nation. If you are able, would you please stand and remove your cover as our Cub Scouts lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, and remain standing as Miss Michelle Sylvester delivers a lovely rendition of our national anthem. Thank you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Now, ladies and gentlemen, if you would please join us for opening prayer, I would now proudly introduce longstanding member of the American Legion, our chaplain and Korean War veteran, Mr. Bill Flynn.
Almighty God, our Heavenly Father, in your hands are the living and the dead. We give you thanks for all of those comrades who have laid down their lives in the service of our country. May they rest in peace, and may the light perpetual shine upon them. May the good work of seeking justice for the oppressed and peace for all mankind be rewarded with success, that their sacrifices shall not have been in vain, and that we may never fail to remember the awesome cost of freedom that we all enjoy. All this we ask in your holy name. Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, to give us a historical reading of Memorial Day, a 6-year veteran of the United States Navy, Mr. Frank Murphy.
At the conclusion of the Civil War, America came to the somber realization that it had suddenly buried more sons than others time in our nation's history. On May 5, 1868, General John A. Logan, head of the Northern Civil War Veterans Organization, called for a nationwide Day of Remembrance. The 30th of May was chosen for the purpose of strewing with flowers the graves of comrades who had died in defense of our country during the late rebellion. Decoration Day, as it was called, was chosen on this date, for it had no particular association with any battle. On the first Decoration Day, President James Garfield made a speech at Arlington National Cemetery, followed by the decorating of 20,000 Union and Confederate graves by more than 5,000 respectful citizens. By 1890, all northern states had made Decoration Day an official state holiday. Southern states continued to honor their dead on separate days until after World War I. After that great conflict, Decoration Day evolved to commemorate the American military personnel who died in all wars. The 30th of May would continue until Congress passed the Uniform Monday Holiday Act of 1968, establishing Memorial Day as the last Monday in May. These brave souls did not try to be heroes. They only wanted to be sons, daughters, fathers and mothers, and even grandparents. These would have been the people we had the honor of knowing, but with the unfortunate perseverance of evils in the world in the likes of dictators, tyrants, religious zealots, and brutal governments. This country, God willing, will never run out of brave men and women willing to die for the defense of freedom, justice, and human dignity. And this country will never stop honoring their sacrifice. Let us use this holiday as the moment of mourning and remembrance. Thank you.
Now, for a reading of the 2020 American Legion speech, the commander of the Jocelyn Cummings, Hanover, American Legion Post 149, himself a 30-year veteran of the United States Coast Guard, Mr. Ray Miller.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Every crisis has new heroes. During the 9/11 attacks, they were the first responders running into burning and crumbling buildings as others ran out. Now, during the coronavirus pandemic, the most visible heroes are the healthcare professionals who are saving others and risking their own lives while doing so. These heroes have much in common with the people that we honor today. America's fallen veterans who have sacrificed their own lives so others could live. Giving their life so others could live is the ultimate definition of selfless. These fallen soldiers were both elite and ordinary. Elite in the sense of character, ordinary in the fact that they represent the diverse factory of our country. They were rich and poor, black and white, male and female. They came from every ethnicity background. In short, they looked like one of us. As we celebrate the selfless and untiring performances of the healthcare workers during the COVID-19 pandemic, it brings to mind the military medics, doctors, and nurses who sacrificed their lives while treating others on the battlefield. Approximately 1 million men and women of the U.S. military have lost their lives in defense of our nation since the founding of this great republic. Not all have died from enemy fire. Some have died from diseases that often festered around war zones. Oftentimes, deaths from diseases and accidents outnumber casualties caused by enemy weapons. The flu has killed 16,000 U.S. soldiers in France during World War I. Another 30,000 American service members died in stateside camps. These men and women could have isolated safely in their homes, but they all knew they had an important job to do, a mission to accomplish and mission to serve. Even when the enemy is an invisible virus or a microscopic germ, the sacrifices made are just as meaningful. This Memorial Day, as we continue to honor those who fell for us in battle, let us also pause to remember those who have sacrificed their lives while serving others. May God bless them, and may God bless you for remembering them here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Ray. Now, in honor of the democracy that these men and women gave their lives for, it gives me great pleasure to call to the podium this community's highest elected official to read the governor's official proclamation of Memorial Day. Ladies and gentlemen, Selectman John Tuzik.
A proclamation. Whereas, while the nation was still recovering from the horrors of the Civil War, people in cities and towns across the country gathered to honor those Union and Confederate soldiers who had given their lives celebrating the first Decoration Day. And whereas, after World War I, the nation came together again to honor those who had fallen in the service of their country. Renamed Memorial Day, the last Monday in May, is when people remember and honor the memory of all men and women who fought and died in all American wars and conflicts. And whereas, throughout our country's history, thousands of Massachusetts citizens have fought in wars and conflicts to defend our safety and way of life. And whereas, their legacy of patriotism and dedication to country is an inspiration to all Americans. And whereas, it is appropriate that all Massachusetts citizens remember the bravery of those who gave their lives so that their sacrifices serve as a reminder of the cost of our freedom. Now, therefore, I, Charles D. Baker, Governor of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, do hereby proclaim May 25th, 2020 to be Memorial Day, and urge that all citizens of the Commonwealth to take cognizance of this event and participate fittingly in its observance. Given at the Executive Chamber in Boston this first day of May in the year 2020, and of the independence of the United States of America, the 243rd. By His Excellency, Charles D. Baker, Governor of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Karen E. Polito, Lieutenant Governor of the Commonwealth.
Thank you, Selectman Tuzik. Now, to honor all of those members of our community, of our past, who gave their lives fighting in wars, I now call to the podium member of the American Legion, himself a veteran of the United States Air Force, to do a roll call of all members of the Hanover community who have given their lives in service to our country. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Sid Elliott.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. As long as our great country is called into conflict, the men and women of this fine community will continue to answer the call. The following is a list of names representing those from our town that made the ultimate sacrifice in protecting our freedoms and liberties. All sons of Hanover, all killed in action in service to our nation in the wars past. World War I roll call. Private Charles E. Cummings. Private Leon W. Jocelyn. Corporal James J. Levings. Private Walter M. McPhee. Yeoman First Class Lucas N. Rice. World War II roll call. Seaman Second Class Donald D. Damon. First Lieutenant Robert N. Freeman. Gunner's Mate Third Class Kenneth H. Pratt. Corporal Frank N. Massey. First Lieutenant Kelvin J. Ellis. Private First Class Thomas X. Filmer. Corporal Leonard R. Hill. First Lieutenant John Manna, Electrician's Mate 3rd Class Richard L. McHugh, Staff Sergeant Oscar Rome, Boatswain's Mate 1st Class Thomas V. Rubicus, Staff Sergeant Charles E. Stetson, Commander W. Turner, Edward W. Turner, Private 1st Class Fred Yetzuk. In the war in Vietnam, Private William Blake, Corpsman Paul J. Edge II, First Lieutenant Thomas R. Goro. May they rest in peace.
Thank you, Sid. As early as ancient times, Greeks and Romans decorated graves of the dead with flowers, and laying wreaths on graves signaled high honors. Memorial Day, as we know it, was formerly known as Decoration Day and began during the Civil War. It is said that women were decorating the graves of fallen soldiers as early as 1861. By the 20th century, Memorial Day honored all fallen soldiers. Today, we still celebrate Memorial Day by putting flowers on the graves of our fallen soldiers who have fought for our freedom. Flowers for Memorial Day are to include the colors of red, white, and blue. Red poppies date back to World War I, when a Canadian officer wrote a famous poem titled "In Flanders Fields," about the bright red poppies growing between the graves of fallen soldiers on the battlefields in Belgium. It is said to represent the blood of fallen soldiers, but also new life and hope amidst desolation. The blue iris means faith and hope, while white means purity. The sounding of taps, as Gustav Cobb stated in 1898, is played slowly and expressively. It has a tender, touching, mournful character, in keeping with the fact that it is sounded not only for lights out, but also over the soldiers' graves, be he general or private, so that as with lights out, night closes in upon the soldier, so with the same call, the curtain call, down upon his life.
Present arms!
Ready? 2. Now, to honor the men and women of the United States military who gave their lives, we now recognize each of their service branches. In recognition of the United States Army, Sergeant Steve Shanks. In honor of the United States Navy, Boatswain's Mate, Frank Murphy. In honor of the United States Marine Corps, Master Sergeant Hans Tietke. In honor of the United States Coast Guard, Chief Petty Officer Ray Miller. In honor of the United States Air Force, Sergeant Sid Elliott. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes our Memorial Day ceremony. Please take the rest of this day to reflect on the sacrifices made by our men and women of the military, and especially those who laid their lives down for our freedoms. Thank you, and God bless.
On this Memorial Day, I would like to thank all veterans who have served in our country, especially my papa, who served in the Army from 1963 to 1966. He was stationed in Germany. And my grandpa, who served in the Navy from 1958 to 1979. He was stationed in Japan.
Hi, my name is Sophia Carroll. I would like to thank my great-grandfather, Robert Carroll, who was in the United States Army and served in World War II. He was stationed in South Pacific Theater in Australia and Guam for 35 months in an engineering task for making airfields from 1941 to 1944. In 1944, he was transferred to Lake Placid, New York. He remained in the Army Reserves for 16 years as a master sergeant, where he was in charge of supplies.
Hi,
Hi, my name is Patrick Blomberg, and I want to introduce you to a fallen hero named Sergeant Stephen DeLuzio from South Glastonbury, Connecticut. He was in the Vermont Army National Guard of Jericho, Vermont. In 2010, he was assigned to go to war. In August 2010, he tragically died during an attack in Afghanistan. He was only 25 years old, and he was supposed to get married in September to our family friend Lisa Gu. Sergeant Stephen DeLuzio died before I was born, so I never knew him. I do know that he has a very nice family. He loves sports, and he could even ride a bike when he was without training wheels when he was 3 years old. He sounds like a pretty cool guy. He was a hero to our country and died so I could have freedom. Thank you, Sergeant DeLuzio. You are my hero.
My name is Audrey Furtazio, and I'm honoring my great-grandfather, Roger Loring Miller. He was a Marine and fought in World War II. He was a hero. My great-grandfather was John J. Hennessy. He was born April 6, 1924. He joined the Army at age 20 and went off to fight in World War II. He was a tank driver and a rifle marksman who fought in 5 major battles all across Europe. He was blown from his tank. The only survivor lost his left leg, blinded in one eye, and burned. He was missing in action for 3 months. When he was found, he was sent home to Walford, Reed. He spent a year at this hospital having many operations. He went on and got married and had 5 children. He worked the rest of his life at Hancom Air Force Base as a supervisor. He received many medals that included 3 Bronze Stars, WW Second Victory Medal, Purple Heart.
Hi, my name is Jack Blank. I'm in the 3rd grade at Center School. Mr. Lovell is my awesome teacher. For Memorial Day, I'd like to pay a tribute to my great uncle. His name is Captain Gary Berenson. Gary was born in 1937 in the town of Marysville, Missouri. He was the oldest of 10 siblings. Uncle Gary joined the Air Force at the age of 22. He was the captain of the Strategic Air Command. My great-uncle Gary was a navigator on the B-52 Sterto Fortress. Unfortunately, Captain Berenson had to pay the ultimate sacrifice and die on the plane when the plane went down in his training mission. Captain Berenson was 27 years old and left behind a wife and 2 young daughters.
The fallen hero I would like to honor is Ruby Bradley. She was a nurse in the Army and dedicated 30 years to the military, becoming only the third woman in U.S. history to be promoted to the rank of colonel. She served in World War II in the Philippines and was captured as a prisoner of war for 3 years. During her time as prisoner, she delivered 13 babies and performed over 200 surgeries. She survived on only a half cup of rice twice a day, and some days she shared this food with starving children in the camp. She and her fellow nurses were nicknamed angels and fatigues. She served as chief nurse in the 8th Army during the Korean War and retired in 1963. Colonel Baby Bradley received 34 national and international awards. She was the most decorated woman in the U.S. military history. She died at the age of 94 and is buried at Arlington National Cemetery. My name is Cameron McMahon, and I researched Air Force Sergeant Joseph J. Hansky. He died on May 26, 2011 in Shoreback District. He was part of the Air Force. He was assigned to the 52nd Civil Engineer. He was an explosive and demolition engineer and trained others to detect and deactivate bombs. He was killed because of explosive devices. He was survived by his wife, 2 sisters, and a brother.
John Manna served in the United States Army during World War II. He was the first lieutenant of the commanding Company Alpha, 137th Infantry of the 35th Division. He graduated from Sylvester High School in June 1933. He enlisted in the Army on March 20, 1941. He was killed in action during World War II near Villers-le-Bonneau, Belgium on January 4, 1945. He was awarded the Silver Star citation for displaying brilliant leadership and high courage in successfully maneuvering his unit through heavy rolling terrain and force and seizing an important road junction held by the enemy. While he was reorganizing his unit and directing the evacuation of casualties, he was killed by a tree-bursting mortar shell. His intrepid actions under heavy enemy artillery, mortar, and machine gun fire were largely responsible for the success of his company and reflect high credit upon his character and training as an officer. Today we want to thank John Manna for making the ultimate sacrifice for our country.
Cemetery flags, also known as grave marker flags, act as a tribute to all the veterans who have served our country. Flags In refers to the ceremony of flag placement on Memorial Day, a tradition first observed in 1868, 3 years after the end of the Civil War, at Arlington National Cemetery in Washington, D.C. Memorial Day is the only holiday on which flags are placed on the graves of those who served their country, whether they fell in combat or retired after faithful military service. This solemn tribute will be carried out at each veteran's grave in cemeteries across our nation. Today, the Hanover American Legion Post 149 will not be denied this honor. As our country struggles through these difficult times, this time-honored tradition toward our fallen will not be ignored. Respect will be paid for the sacrifices made.